Okay, right. Welcome everyone. So this is the third session in how to eat an elephant, an introduction to project management. This session is yet again going to have a practical component where you're going to do a mini project in it. And we welcome Benjamin from us back to present the session. Thank you so much, Ben, and I'll hand over to you. Oh, and just also a quick note that this session is recorded so that you can refer back to it, which will be shared with you again. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this third session on how to eat the elephant. I hope it will be riveting and exciting and that we open up new horizons for you. What we're going to look at today, if I can just get my slide started. Is last time we got up to how to plan a project and we didn't quite complete the how to plan a project. So, a hearty welcome to everybody. If this is the first time that you're joining, there's 2 previous sessions and I suggest that you watch the recordings. What I'm going to distribute is at the end of the session, we will give you the link that you can use to go and complete the actual course on LinkedIn. As explained, this is a free project management course. You should be able to access it even if you have an unpaid membership on LinkedIn, subject to you completing this within a month if you haven't done any training before. Because you get 1 month grace as in free training on LinkedIn if you do not have membership. The course itself, you should really be able to complete within 2 hours. So I think it shouldn't be too much of a challenge for you to complete it within a month. It has a very short exam at the end of it. It's monkey puzzle, multiple choice. On successful completion, you'll get 3 certificates, 1 from LinkedIn, 1 from the American Project Management Institute, which is one of the biggest project management institutes in the world. And there's 1 more, which I'm not exactly sure which that was now. Now, to get back to where we ended last time, we have gone through a whole bunch of considerations for projects, and I'm going to do a very quick recap. So there's the triple constraints. It is referred to as the high-end constraints or the high-end triangle because you can't break it. Commonly, a lot of project management material or literature will refer to specifically budget, scope, and time. If you do a little bit more advanced project management, you will see that quality is a thing as well. So there's some slight differences between what I'm presenting to you and the course material. When you do the actual course on LinkedIn, you will see that they don't refer to, for example, budget, scope, time, and quality. They only have 3 constraints. The reason being is it's an entry-level course and I made it really simple. This is, however, it's a very important criteria or a very important thing which you need to consider and keep in mind when you do your planning. So that's why I brought it in. Now, if you do a project, if you, so the departure point that I'm following which is Prince 2. It is a project management methodology. If you are on budget and you are on scope and you finish your project on time, then you have quality. Now, assuming that you planned the thing properly, if you left out things, you didn't consider all of the aspects, you ran into problems, you might complete scope and you might complete time, but you'll miss budget or somewhere you'll fall over bus. Now, what frequently happens in projects is that you can be on scope on time, but you miss your budget. Or alternatively, you do something within budget, you do it within the time that was allocated, but you miss half of the things that you were supposed to do. Lastly, you could be on scope and on time, and you are on scope and on budget, and you miss on time. Now, we have gone through a whole bunch of real examples, everyday examples, and I've given you examples from real projects in the real world. We've looked at ESCOM, we've looked at SASOL, we've looked at NASA, we've looked at a whole bunch of things that happens with projects. We did a little poll and we discussed some of the key problems when you start a project, which is specifically one of them is understanding the project. Everybody looks at the problem from a different angle. If I look at it from their perspective, which means what I think about the problem and what I understand about the problem is not necessarily the same what you think and understand about the problem. And this is one of the areas where you need to make sure that your team gets on the same page. Everybody needs to work towards the same objective and the same goals. If you have a completely different understanding of what needs to be done to the rest of the team, it's going to cause projects, that's going to cause challenges and problems for the project and for the team. And obviously, you're not going to get where you're going. Now, we've also discussed that when you start a project, you need to agree the project role players, the governance systems, the rules, who depends on who, the scope, the budget, the timelines, who's involved, the processes, and exactly what the deliverables are. Now, it's also, as explained, it's very important to specify the scope, the budget, and the time, and understand in the words of whoever you are doing this project for. If you're doing it for the rector, if you're doing it for department head, everybody will have a key fundamental requirement. For example, this has to be done by Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock. It is an unmovable deadline. So regardless of what you do, regardless of how difficult it is, time is your non-negotiable constraint. Or alternatively, let's say you are redoing your bathroom and you have exactly 30,000 saved up. You do not have more money. You cannot spend more money than what you have. So that is your unmovable constraint. Or in certain instances, scope could be the key constraint, where there are certain things which you simply have to do no matter how much effort or budget it takes. Now, what you have to do to understand what your scope is you and your team can brainstorm. Alternatively, you can bring in external people. You can bring in experts from other departments or people who have done it before. Like, for example, if you are implementing a new learning management system, somewhere in the world, there will be somebody who has done it. There could be in other departments, people who have more experience than your team. So then you bring one of them in as an advisor. Next element is a work breakdown structure. So we spend quite a bit of time taking a big project or a big problem and breaking it down into little bits and putting these little bits into sequence. This is exactly what a work breakdown structure is. It's a logical sequence. Now, what we've discussed is that there are certain challenges. Number one, not everybody's on the same page, or they don't have the same understanding, they don't have the same perspective. And the opposite of that is groupthink. Groupthink is when nobody thinks differently and everybody thinks that they understand exactly what's going on. And they think the same. They cannot think out of a box as a group. They are not objectively analyzing the problem. The next challenge is granularity, which is the level of detail. So when you think about the problem, you need to break it down in little steps. And sometimes those little steps, you have to break down in further little steps and possibly in further little steps. And your challenge is going to be, and this is something that comes with experience, if you start breaking down a problem to form a work breakdown structure, the challenges and the project plan, where do you stop? When is it enough detail? Is it at this point, or is it at this point, or is it at this point? And you can imagine for yourself, that's not an easy question to answer. Now, what we've then said is once you have all of the bits and bytes of a project, you place it in a logical sequence. And you have to understand that sometimes there's dependencies. What this means is that some parts have to be done before other parts, or they could happen concurrently, or they can only start when something else is finished. So I've given you an example where we want to open a shop, and in order to open the shop, we first have to decide in which town we are going to get a shop, and then we have to locate the facility, we have to buy the facility, we have to plan the inventory, we have to get the staff, and we can have our opening day, and then we can have a welcoming party. So what this little diagram does is simply show you how to put the stuff in a logical sequence. And once you have it in a logical sequence, it is important to look at the duration. So there's certain things that have to happen in sequence and certain steps that will influence other steps. So you need to understand which those are. For example, once you selected the town, you can appoint a manager and you can appoint the staff, and you can, because you need the staff to order the inventory. And you need to receive the inventory before you can unpack the inventory. But you need shelves before you can unpack the inventory, because the shelves have to be installed. Otherwise, the inventory is turning around on the floor. So you need to work out what the logical sequence is. And for each of these events, I have here assumed that the planning is happening in weeks. So you'll see at the top of each little post-it, there's a number. If you register a legal entity and you did all of your homework and you've got all of your paperwork together, it is possible in South Africa to go to the CIPC and to register a company within 1 day. Taking a business permit might take longer. We've assumed, for example, it could take a week. Now, if we find the site, because you have to look between a variety of potential sites, it could take you 4 weeks. And if you have to buy, it could, for argument's sake, take you 6 weeks. And you have to wait for property transfer, etc., etc. Now, some things have a 0 duration. There's one person who's got a mic that is switched on. Some things could, for argument's sake, take 0 duration. For example, get the keys. This is not going to take you weeks and weeks. If the property is yours, the seller comes to you and he hands the keys to you. It's literally a matter of minutes. So on your project plan, you are not going to do it a day or multiple days, it's a milestone, and it could potentially have a duration of 0. Okay. Now the duration, as we said, is not the sum of all of the durations of the individual events. What is the reason for this? It is simply because a lot of these things can happen concurrently. They can happen side by side. While the one thing is busy, you can maybe start on the next. So you don't have to wait for some of these. In some cases you have to, but generally if you have a team, you can start one person on part 1 and you can start another person on part 2, and they can work concurrently. So what you need to do is to work out the critical path, which is the amount of time that takes the activities that will take the longest, and plan your projects around them. And I worked out it is potentially possible to get a critical path to do the project in 33 weeks as opposed to doing the project in 55 weeks, which is the sum total of everything if you do it sequentially. Now, it's important to work in a little bit of a contingency. So that is, what that means is if something should take you a week, in all probability, you give yourself 1 day or maybe 2 days for a week just to make sure you do it within time. You can't give yourself, if you have planned it should take a week, you can't give yourself 3 weeks or 5 weeks or 9 weeks, because that's hopelessly too much. You are not going to be very productive if you build in too much contingency. So the contingency is just a little bit of a safety margin that you put in. Now, when you do your planning for your activities, you work on the average number of days or time periods that it should take to do something. So if you paint a room, it's a big room and you're only one person, it should maybe take you 2 days. It is possible that you can do it in quicker, and it is possible that if the phone rings a lot, or if you get interrupted, or if you're very lazy, you are going to be longer than 2 days. So for your project planning and working out the contingency, if your average is hypothetically 2 days, you think worst case, it's unlikely that I'm going to do it within 4 or longer than 4. So your worst case is 4 days, your average is 2 days, and then you pick a spot halfway in between. That gives you, if you look at a standard distribution, for those of you that's done statistics, it makes sure that you are 90% safe. You are most probably going to finish it with a 90% degree of accuracy halfway in between, subject to you not resting on your laurels and still putting in the required effort. You can't sit and watch Netflix the whole day and assume that you are still going to finish a project within the 90% safety margin by doing nothing. It doesn't work like that. Now, if our example is an average period, it should take 10 weeks if we look at past experience to do a specific type of a project. And the worst case, if a lot of things go wrong, it could possibly take 18 weeks, and we have to be 90% safe when we find the 50% spot somewhere in between. And that means we do our project planning on 14 weeks. 14 weeks should give us more than adequate time to finish the project, and we should have a little bit of an extra margin in the event that something does go wrong. So how do you go and allocate your contingency? As you find the critical path, and my critical path, so if you look at your average in blue, we have calculated that the average appears to be that you can do this in 33 weeks. Now, if we can apply our minds and we speak to people in the industry and people who have started stores or who have done similar projects, they tell you it could potentially take up to 57 weeks if things go really bad, which is quite a lot of time. And we don't want to do our planning for 57 weeks because that means we are not going to be very productive, and it is most likely probable that we will finish in much less than 57. So we do our planning to be 90% safe, which means we go halfway in between and you look at each and every worst case scenario. So if you look at town, which is the very first blue posted on the left-hand side. So yeah, I'm trying to drive my mouse because my screens are swapped from what you are seeing. So my worst case, if I have to allocate, I said year 4, but we think, well, maybe let's put in 5 just to be sure. And to find the site, we said worst case 6, but we think actually it could be done in 5. And to buy, well, that could be realistic. Let's rather, because this is the risky thing that can take time. It's completely out of our hands. There's lawyers involved. If it's negotiation involved, so maybe we stick to the worst case. And property transfer, we had a worst case of 20 days, but realistically, we think it's possible to do. And at the end of the day, we do our planning to allocate and get back to a point that is halfway between 33 weeks and the 57 weeks. Now, what we've said to one another, it's possible to do project crashing. This is terminology that is very specific to the project management industry, and it is possible that when you talk to somebody and you say, I am crashing my project, that their eyes are going to grow big and they think that you're kind of stupid and they ask you what you're smoking because they think crashing the project is like crashing a car. And it's actually not the same thing. So just be aware of the fact that some people can be confused by the terminology of project crashing. It doesn't mean that you are stuffing up your project. It means that you are trying to find a way to compact the timelines and to do it faster. So how do you do this? Number one, you can add more budget. If you have more budget available, which means you can get more people, or you can get more resources, or better equipment, faster equipment, bigger equipment, or you could work longer hours. Alternatively, you could reduce the scope, which means you take a project down from all of our wish list items, the nice to haves, down to the absolute essentials. Or, and this is not ideal, you could reduce the quality, drop it a little bit. Or lastly, you could overlap activities. So how do we do overlapping? And this is exactly up to where we got last time. So if we have to buy a building and buy shelves and buy stock, you don't have to wait for the keys of a building before you can buy the shelves or before you can buy the stock. So if we break each of these activities down into smaller steps, get shelves, you get quotes, you decide on one of them, you order the shelves, and when the shelves arrive, you install. So you can buy your shelves before you have a building, but you time it so that the shelves arrive within a day or two after the building is available to you. That means you could save a lot of time. Similarly, for the stock, you don't have to wait until you get the shelves before you decide what you want to buy. You can move it up. And in that way, you are compressing your project timelines and you save so much time in total. Now, it is possible for if you are a brand new first-time person in project management, it is possible to do your plans in Excel. There are lots of better software to use for project management than Excel. But we are, for those of you who are new, I'm going to give you an example in Excel. For the project administrators, we are going to jump into a little practical case study in a few minutes. You are more than welcome to solve this problem in Microsoft Project. And I would love it if one of you could really go to town and do it properly so that we can show the rest of the team what a Microsoft project plan looks like. There's lots of project software on the market. There are certain types of project softwares. There's certain types that are very useful for large teams working on big projects. They use it on, for example, software development, etc. So if you have heard of Basecamp or Monday.com or Trello, these could potentially be very useful software to use. And going forward, I suggest that your department should standardize and pick a specific type of software to use.
So just on that note, you can, so with Office 365, there's the task manager where you can assign tasks and so forth. So if you click on Office 365, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's like a planner and a task manager, but you'll also see Office Project. If you click on that, you'll see that it says you don't have access to it. However, you can ask IT for a license for MS Project. So it's not, you need to download it, but you can ask IT for a license. The other thing that we use is ClickUp, and I also know there's an educational license for Asana, which is another project management software.
Okay, so what you can see is that there's quite a number of ways to skin a cat. There's various types of software that we can use. I am going to keep it very simple and start by giving you an explanation and a demo in Excel, or actually you're going to work with me through the case study. So please understand, I'm not saying use Excel. This is simply, it's a very simplistic way of illustrating how to do it. Microsoft Project is infinitely better than doing it in Excel. But if you want to do a quick and dirty exercise, then you can use Excel. Quick and dirty is terminology that you use in projects. It doesn't mean that you are physically going to get dirty. It simply means that you are not doing a whole scale exercise to do a project. You do a quick and dirty project to see, it's like taking all of the possible shortcuts. So if we use an example in Excel, and I'm going to explain some of the differences for you. Now, if you have Excel open, for you, those of you who have never done a project, open Excel. At the very top, type in a date.
So we'll just give you a minute to open Excel. If you finished opening Excel, just raise your hand.
And for the project administrators or everybody who does have Microsoft Project, please open Microsoft Project so that you can stick to us or bear with us and you can see for yourself what some of the differences between the two pieces, the two types of software is. I will explain it as well. For example, one of the benefits of Excel is that, I meant Microsoft Project, is that Microsoft Project is already thinking in terms of time periods. So you probably, if you open up Microsoft Project, there will already be dates and stuff at the top and weeks. You could quite easily set it to start on whatever day you want. For example, 1 April, or if you work in weeks and months, it is a little bit easier to do it in Microsoft Project, and it looks very neat because it is built into the project. But in Excel, you simply go and put in one row. So a row is horizontal and a column is vertical. In one row, you go and put today and tomorrow and the day after. Or if you work in weeks, you do it in weeks. And you put your dates. One row below, you go and say day one or week one or whatever the case is. And if you drag it, Excel should automatically complete it. Now, you remember what we've done is we've taken post-its on a whiteboard and we have put all of our activities in a logical sequence. And we built a work breakdown structure. And when we took our work breakdown structure and we flipped it 90 degrees, so it goes from left to right, and we did a mini project plan. So those key activities, you are now going to write in Excel from top to bottom. So what this method, the course that you are going to do in LinkedIn teaches you is to first stick to the critical path and list all of those activities and then list the rest. Now, I don't object to it. What the benefit of this is you'll see in a second is that you are going to get the big picture view of where you are on your project. If you first list vertically, select and find side by side, do the property transfer, get the keys, install shelving, etc., etc. And then after that, whatever other activities you have not listed, you simply list them from top to bottom. If you have resources, so a resource is a person, it could be a vehicle or a computer or a piece of software or a thing that you use to do work and it needs to be involved at a specific point in time. You could allocate the resources to the activities. So what that means is, let's say you are doing data analytics and you have a massive amount of data that you have to crunch, and you speak to the IT department at WITS, and they allow you to use one of the supercomputers that is hanging around in a basement somewhere. But they give you a specific appointment. They will give you from Monday morning, 10 o'clock, up to Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. If you miss that time slot, you missed it. Then you have to wait a week or 2 months before they have another opening for you. It is important for you to go and plot those kinds of resources, even if it's not a person, to go and plot it in your project so that you can make sure that you align your project and your project is ready when you have access to the specific resources. The same if you're moving, if you know you need trucks and the trucks are available on a specific date, you have to allocate it. Now, in some cases, you might not know who the people are that's going to work on a project, but another department will tell you, we will give you 6 resources to help you with this, and we'll give you 4 resources to help you with that. Then You can put in a generic person 1, person 2, person 2, 3, person 4. If you don't know, it's as Joe, Sarah, Sipo, and whoever. So what it's going to look like once you have allocated everything. Now you remember that my logical flow had specific color of post-it notes. So simply use the same color. My select down project stream, work stream, was blue. And everything around the site was in pink. And everything about personnel was in like a apricot-y pink. And how to find, or everything about the legal entity was in a light turquoise, etc., etc. And the shelving was in green. So you color your project in, and you will find that some activities have to happen in between other activities. For example, registering a legal activity. It doesn't take a lot of time, and we calculated that it should take us no more than 32 hours in total. So it's 8 plus 24. But it can happen, if you look on the screen, it can happen anywhere between this. So go and find a place to allocate it. And it is possible that you put it down here, and later when you see your entire project plan and you start to compact and compress and crash your project, that you move it around. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world if you move it 1 week earlier or a week later, as long as it finishes between these sections. So you simply draw a line down from each work stream or set of activities, and that will give you a very clear indication for subsequent activities. How long and how much time do you have? For example, to get your staff, you are still busy negotiating, or you have negotiated the building, you bought the building, and you are now waiting for transfer of the building. Now would be a good time to get your staff. If you get your staff too late, so if you start, say for example, you only start advertising for people to send in with CVs, and you do it here. Then you have to get the CVs, you have to collate the CVs, you have to review the CVs, you have to invite people for interviews. Sometimes they're busy, they can't come for an interview. You have to do the interview, etc., etc. You're wasting a lot of time. So this is an example of activity that you can move back to get you sufficient time. Don't do it too late because you lose time. The flip side of a coin is don't do it too early. Because once you have appointed your people and you give them a letter and say you start on Monday, if I start here, you don't have the building yet, which means that you are still at least a month and a half or so away from being able to use these people productively. And meanwhile, they are sitting on your project and they are eating up your budget. So you need to very carefully plan your allocation of activities and when is the best point in time to do something, so that A, you don't waste time or lose time, and B, you don't spend too much money, because you can have people sitting around on a project doing dirty squat and you have to pay for them. Now, on a project, you have something that's called a milestone. A milestone is a reference point that marks a significant event or a branching decision point. So you could, for example, if you look at specific sites and you have narrowed your sites down to 2 or 3 sites, and you make a decision that you are going with site C, that could be a milestone. Or a milestone could be you've decided between Boksburg, Benoni, Springs, and Fourways, and you pick Fourways. That could be a milestone, because that is a significant event or a branching decision point. Normally in projects, a milestone is indicated by a little diamond. And this is something that you could automatically do in Microsoft Project. If you are in Excel, you have to go to drawing tools and pick a diamond and go and put it in. Next item is a project dependency. Now we spoke about this. So sorry for this technical gobbledygook that you at the bottom. A project dependency is a logical, constraint-based, or preferential relationship between two or more activities or tasks, such that the completion or initiation of one is reliant on the completion or initiation of the other. So in plain English, what did I just say? What this means is some things have to start before other things can start. Some things can only start once something else has finished. And some things are not dependent on anything. They could run concurrently. In Excel, what you can then do is you go and put in the amount of time that it should take. So you can see each of these little blocks are completed. A week has 40 working hours. So if you think somebody is going to take 40 working hours, you put it in. And at the bottom, you put in a equal. And this equals adds up the sum of everything from the first row down to the last activity. And this gives you a breakdown of how many hours of a week are required. This is a high level overview. It's a first, let's call it the first calculation, and I'm going to in a minute show you why you need to do it in a little bit more detail if it's required. If we look at our resources, so we have a project manager who's person A, and we've got person B, and sometimes some activities like building shelves or unpacking inventory, we need a whole team. So we have persons E, F, G, and H. I don't know yet what their names are, so I put in a generic placeholder. And because these are sequential, then I can use person E, F, G, and H, but they're not enough, so I need I and J as well to unpack. If you take this and you do the same calculation sideways, so from, sorry if I'm looking stupid, I'm trying to drive my mouse on a second screen. So if I add up from, oops, if I add up from the very first item, from here, in the same row, all the way to the end, I get to 150. And similarly, for every row, I keep on doing it. And I do the same kind of calculation. Then I know how much time in total this project might take. But sometimes you need to know how much time is allocated to specific resources. So let's say each of these people cost you 1 unit of money. We keep it simple. So for 1 unit of time, you pay 1 unit of money. For example, R1 or $1. Now you know person A, in this first activity, you use person A full time, and person A is busy for 150 hours over the 5 weeks. Simply complete this exercise and go down and plot it out. So you can see that person A is in the first activity, you need him for 150. Second activity is involved 150. Or I mean, that's person B, and you go and work it out. And when you have multiple team members, you go and calculate the time. Why do you do this in this way? The reason for this is once you do your initial planning, you will see a standard month is 160 hours or 168 hours. If you do it this way, you can see that Joe's soap was used for 300 hours in a month, but has only 160 hours. So what does that mean? That means you are going to work Joe's soap to death. You even need to reallocate the work and bring in more people, or you need to rethink your work, or alternatively, you may have to offer Joe's Soap a bribe or a bonus and tell him you are going to work to nearly up to death for the next month, so that they can psychologically prepare themselves for what's waiting for them. So if you do this in Excel, what you have achieved is number one, you have a very quick, big picture overview of your project. You know of all of the tasks that has to be done. You have an idea for each individual task and work stream because you did it in different colors. You can see which activities are part of which work stream. You can see when it has to happen and how much leeway you have to plan and to move your stuff around. You can see how much time you need in total. You can do a costing for how much your project is going to cost you. You can see if your people are double booked and are overutilized or underutilized. This is a very quick calculation. Well, it will take you maybe a few minutes to do it, but if you do it properly, it's a very useful way to make sure that your specifically resources are effectively utilized. There's not one person who's doing literally nothing and 5 people are working themselves to death, or vice versa. You can make sure that you allocate the work on a more equitable basis. Now, if we look at dependencies, dependencies can get a little bit complicated. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in terms of how complicated it can get. I'm going to keep it simple. There are more than 4 types of dependencies, and some of them are so complicated, I'm not sure I 100% understand them. But for starters, for you to know, you get a start to finish. What that is if you bill a customer, you have to do the work. So let's say I'm a paint contractor and you ask me to paint your room. You are not going to pay me before I've done the work. So that's a start to finish example. There's a finish to start dependency, which means a particular task B cannot start before task A is completed satisfactorily. There is a start to start dependency, which means the next activity cannot start before the first one is finished. There's a finish to finish dependency that says the task can't finish before the task before it is also finished at the same time. So I have to, for example, I have to finish painting before I can finish billing you. Another example would be if there's a red carpet event, the hair and makeup lady that goes with a movie star, so she can't she can't do the finishing touches of the makeup before that movie star actually gets to the red carpet. You have to get, or at least get to the venue. It could be a few meters away and on the other side of the cameras. You don't, if you are a beginner, you will have to spend a little bit time and effort to wrap your mind around these things. It is, some of it is more logical than you think, but some of these could potentially get very complicated. Now, I've already alluded to the fact when you do your resource planning, it is possible that you can find out you have over allocated one person. A person has, on average, 40 working hours in a week. And if you go and do your initial planning and you find out that you are double booking people, person A needs to spend 40 hours on this activity and 40 hours on that activity, it's not going to work. If you have sufficient time, then you can simply reallocate your activities. So this is one of the useful ways to do the planning of a project, and you get the big picture planning. There should be software that will immediately indicate to you that person A or person B on your first attempt is completely overutilized, so that you can do it. Otherwise, you have to go and do this manual calculation. Now we're going to do an individual challenge. If you have Excel, and again, unfortunately, we're working against time. Otherwise, I have to see you again for a fourth session. So I'll ask that we stick to the 10 minutes, please. If you have Excel, if you've never done project management before, open Excel. If you're a project administrator, open up your Microsoft project if you have it. I'm going to give you a very easy problem. It's almost as easy as the make coffee challenge that we had in the beginning. You are going to do this individually. So each person is going to make an effort to do this. So your approach before I tell you what the challenge is I understand the problem, break up the problem into work streams and tasks. So I've even done that for you. I'm going to tell you what the 3 work streams are, and we can possibly, to keep it simple, we can come up with generic tasks, and then you are going to do a mini project plan. Please understand, this is an exercise. I don't expect you to develop an Excel spreadsheet with macros and auditability, and you are not going to send the satellite up to the moon or Mars. This is simply a very tiny Microsoft project plan that you are going to assemble. The timelines that I'm giving you is we are going to do a renovation project based on past experience. This project should, on average, be able to be completed within 3 weeks. This is the average estimate. The worst case estimate is if everything goes wrong, it will take at least 8 weeks. So when we do our project planning, we have to find 50% in between. Now, here is what you are going to do. We are going to do a little renovation project. I present to you this room. Each person, you have unlimited budget, but you have 4 resources that you have to work with. And what we expect from you, so like I said to you, when you do a project, it's important to envision or be on the same page to understand what the end product is. So this is what I expect it to look once you're done. You are not going to buy furniture, you are not going to buy carpets, you are not going to buy decor or pot plants. You are responsible for. You're going to redo the ceiling because you can see the ceiling looks like it falls out. You are going to redo the floor because the wood looks like it's fraught. And you have to redo the walls and break out that cupboard that sits on the right-hand side. So you have the following resources. You have yourself. You are the project manager. You can spend as little or as much time on this as you want. You've got Bobby. Bobby is a floor expert. You can't use him for walls and ceilings. You've got Joe, and Joe can work on everything because Joe is a general contractor and he's extremely handy. And then you have Zeke, and Zeke can work on floor and walls. So what you're going to do is open up Excel. Hopefully you have it ready. Your worst case scenario, if I go back to the previous slide, is 8 weeks. You should be able to do this in 3 weeks. So you are going to do your critical path. You have to do your planning over 50% between 3 and 8 weeks. Use each column as a week. What I would suggest is the same generic steps for each of these tasks. So for all the ceiling, remove a current ceiling, or first get quotes for new ceiling material. Start with that. Then you remove a current ceiling, by which time you should have received the material for the new ceiling, and then you install it. And the same with the floors. You get the quotes, you break down what is there, you replaster it and install it. And the same with the floor. So each of them have 4 sub-steps. And the logical sequence that I would suggest that you use is first do the walls. Because if your walls are uneven, it's going to show on your ceiling and on your floor. If you do the floor first, and then the walls and the ceiling, if I mess and everything falls on the floor, then your new floor is damaged. So the sequence, first do walls with their 4 steps, then do ceilings with their 4 steps, and then do the floor with their 4 steps, and use these people. I'm giving you 10 minutes. This is a big invitation to the project administrators. You are welcome in the 10 minutes to give us a little Microsoft project plan that will wow and impress the audience. Your 10 minutes starts now. My fraud, my chit-chat het gedisappear. If you are one of those super performers and you are super fast and very good with this, please stick up your hand and say done or finished already as soon as you've done it. Ons gaan klaarmaak vandag. Die laaste deel is baie vinnig. As ek net hierdie is die meat van die kursus. Kan jy net my chat heel terugbring? Dis mis. nou soos. So ek kan 'n mens swap en vir iemand anders die screen gee dat hulle sien. If you are ready, please shout the moment that somebody thinks that they have something that they want to share with the class. And my specific day to the project administrators, show us something in Microsoft project that will wow us. Okay, we are 70% in terms of time. So you have a little bit less than 3 minutes left over. Open invitation the moment that you have something that you want to show. And how is it looking? Is there anybody who feels that they have something that they have ready to show? Even if it's a rough draft, you have roughly 1 minute left. Okay, guys, is there anybody who wants to take the screen and show us what we've done? By show of hands, just say me, and then you can show the team. I see one hand. Can you please take the screen and show the team what you've done?
Hi, Benjamin. Can I just say something before I share?
You're welcome.
So I missed most of the instruction, but I caught only a few wordings. But this is what I have so far. Let me just go and do you see some?
Yes, yes, I can see.
So I just from what you had been saying about project, the tool. So this is what I entered so far. 5 days. I used 5 days to complete the project and allocated resources. Don't know if I got that right.
Okay, the timing was between 3 weeks and 8 weeks. So you were supposed to do it in halfway, but if you did it in 5 ways, then you are super effective, and I'm very impressed. But for purposes of this exercise, the objective of the exercise is to give everybody the opportunity to take tasks and put it in a logical sequence, and to draw it in whichever software you want to draw it, and to see how one thing flows into the next thing. So you are more than welcome to continue practicing this in your own time. This indeed, if you are going to do project management, you are going to do this for the rest of your life. But it's very important to get this skill down, because you need to be good with it. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to show us what they did? Okay, if not, I don't see another hand, so I am going to continue. Volgende slide. Is ek nog weg? Okay, just taking back the screen. Can everybody see me? Okay, last time when we were sitting in class, one of the people said, okay, so how much do we need? It is possible when you do a project that you can go to town, you can put a lot of standards in place. You can put a lot of systems in place. You can do a lot of risk management, and it could potentially be overkill for what you are trying to achieve. And this is where it becomes a fine art. It's better to have standards and systems and risk management in place than not have it in place and find out that you needed to have it. But to a large extent, it depends on what you are actually trying to achieve. So let's say Johannes asks you to do a graphic, one graphic for one slide. The amount of effort is maybe 25 minutes. You are not going to draw up a project plan to do something that's going to take you 25 minutes. But you need to sit and work through exactly what is expected so that you do the right thing. Let's say the instruction is to do a presentation. A presentation is a number of slides and a number of graphics and quite a bit of content. And you need to plan what is the sequence. You need to plan what is the content. You need to plan how much of each topic do you need to address. So that is quite a bit more effort than just doing one graphic. Let's say you have to do a course content. That is considerably more work than doing one presentation. Again, you have to consider what is the content and break it down and break it down and break it down until you get to the right level of detail. This is much more effort, it's more work. You need more standards and more systems and more risk management. If you make a mistake with course content, and for example, you say use drug A, and actually that was the wrong one because you made a typo and it should have been drug B, that could have very bad consequences. So your quality control needs to be much better. Let's say you are doing an interdepartmental project or an inter-university project. Just think of how much effort goes into that. If VETS and UCT and tax decides to do a research project together, you need to decide who's going to do what. There's a whole governance system that's needed. If you need to implement a new capital project, that could, a capital project as an example is when a university installs a new computer system. That could have significant implications, and your planning needs to be in much more detail than just doing a graphic. But now conversely, let's say, and I touched on this example last time, let's say you have to do a slide, which is this one, but you have to do this for the faculty dean, and the faculty dean is going to present at World Health Organization. This is no longer an interdepartmental or inside your department presentation. This is worldwide. Think of how much effort goes into those 3 or 4 slides and the preparation. It could be substantial, and various people and role players within the university could be involved in simply drawing up 3 or 4 or 5 slides. So the question, how much do you need of standards and systems and risk management? It depends on what is the risk, what can go wrong, how much time is involved and effort, what is the budget that is at a risk here. Any computer systems are involved, because you first need to understand what are the touch points between these systems and what is dependent on what. What is the required quality? What is the team size? Is it 1 person? Is it 10 people? Is it a faculty, or is it a university that's involved? What is the complexity? What can go wrong? is where legal requirements for medical, there definitely are legal and ethical and other ramifications. For various other departments, there could be different compliance requirements. Who are the role players? Is it you and the next people sitting next to you every day? Or is it within your department, or is it across departments, or is it within your faculty, or is it across faculties, or is it across universities? And what are you trying to achieve? What's the application in the context? So it is better as a department to set up and develop certain generic standards and systems and risk management, and have this if you need it. And when you have a specific deliverable, then you can decide for a slide. We are not going to do a project plan. We are not going to do a this and a that and so on, but still you plan and you break it down into little steps. If it is a presentation, there's a little bit more standards and requirements. If it is a course, X, Y, and Z requirements. If it is an interdepartmental projects, X, Y, and Z. So what we say to one another, what frequently happens in projects, is that on day one, you go to a project meeting, nobody really understands what has to happen. The person who has the meeting says, okay, fantastic team, now go forth and do the work. And you walk out, you have no idea what is expected of you. You have no idea what's required. And then confusion sets in. And that project is not going to be a success. So once you have done all of this planning, you have taken the big picture, you have broken it down, then you can have a second project meeting and you can finalize who's the role players, because now you can go back and say to your project manager or your project leader, I don't think if it is across departments, it's not a good thing that only us by ourselves are involved. We need to involve our IT, we need to involve legal, we need to involve finance, for example. If it is a big or a complex project, you can bring all of that into play and do your project documentation. So your project charter, this is for a very big project. It will have all of these, the role players, the structure, the overlap, the scope, the budget, the time, etc. The standards, very important to state your assumptions and your risks. Now, project assumptions is, for example, if you agree with our IT that you have access to the supercomputer, then that is a fundamental assumption for the success of your project. And you need to state it, and somebody needs to keep track of it, so that you can't just by yourself in isolation assume something's going to happen and then it never happens. Project risks and project budget, we've discussed those. Now, something else that can happen in the project is you could have scope changes where halfway through you discover that what you set out to achieve was maybe not ideal, or there were things that come to your attention which you were not aware of, and now you have to change course, or you have to change your scope, or you have to make some other kind of an adjustment. Now I am going to go into, so this is what we have discussed up to now is project planning. Now, if you have actually started with your projects, you have to keep track of what's going on. And you do this with project meetings and daily stand-ups. A project meeting, all of you would have been in a project meeting, is where you get everybody together in a room or a virtual session, and you have a big discussion about it. You could also have daily stand-ups. This is a very effective way to get your team on the same page and to keep track of what everybody's doing. So a daily stand-up is literally, it comes from you get the relevant people into a room. This meeting takes maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and you run through your team and say, the project manager will say, person one, what are you busy with? According to my plan, you have to do A, B, and C this week. Give me a status update. He gives his status update. If there's a specific issue with number C, he will say what the issue is. And the project manager, if it's like a big potential problem that is unearthed there, the project manager will say, okay, let's take it offline. We can have a separate discussion. So it's a very short, quick meeting to the point. What are you doing? Have you encountered issues? Are you on time? How are you going to complete? A big problem, and a lot of you guys might have experienced this. I actually don't want to say I might have experienced it. You would have experienced it. Is that you are involved in meetings that should have been an email, or you get an email and all and sundry, including the tea lady and the receptionist, are copied, and it has nothing to do with you, and it could have been simply a telephone call. This happens often in projects and in corporate. So the point that I want to leave you with is, don't have a meeting just because you're lonely and you want to have people to speak to. If you have a meeting, it is for very important, specific purposes that you need to address. You don't, in our ideal world, if there's lots of decisions that have to be taken, what big companies do to ensure that their meetings are successful and efficient, because you don't want to waste time. If it is a board meeting and they have to decide between strategy 1 and strategy 2, that information is disseminated and shared to the people in the meeting a week or 2 weeks before, and they go and read it. And in the meeting, you have a discussion about the information. The meeting is not an information session where people start absorbing and wrapping their heads around something. If it is a big thing, you prepare them, and that will mean that your meeting is going to be much more efficient. It's going to be much faster, but people will come and ask relevant questions because they already absorbed the basic information, and everything is simply much more efficient. So don't have a meeting. Next thing is, don't have meetings for just any purpose. Make sure when you really need a meeting. Make sure if it doesn't need a meeting, you could probably resolve it with an email. If you have emails, don't copy all and sundry and the rector and whoever. It specifically happens if somebody wants to attack somebody else. That's not what the email was meant for. It's a massive waste, and a lot of people have, you might not see it if you at the lower levels. The senior people will have a lot of the information that is copied to them via CC'd or or blind copied in things that are completely irrelevant. And it makes it difficult for them to efficiently and effectively manage their lives because they get dragged into things where they shouldn't be involved. So make sure when it has to be a meeting, is it something that could be addressed with email? Or is it something that could be addressed with a telephone call or WhatsApp? If you need to ask me something, pick up the phone and ask me. You don't need to CC the entire faculty to get the answer that you would have liked to get. So around communication protocols, this is something why that you would have to, as a department, make your own internal rules. If we look at, and this is a little bit of comic relief, if we go drill down into why I CC'd you on this email, and this is specifically under normal work circumstances, not lockdown, because I'll get to that in a moment. If you are sitting next to one another in the office, don't email unnecessarily, because the reasons why people email one another is one is I email you for no good reason, maybe just because you're my boss, or I want to make you feel guilty or get you to do something. And that's why I'm copying other people into an email so that you can feel forced or coerced. Or I'm trying to cover my own ass, and I want to prove later that you knew that I was going to do something or not do it. Or I thought it would be helpful. Or I'm trying to pull a move and to exert my dominance in the department. Or I'm trying to embarrass you. A lot of these are not valid reasons to send the email. Now, the work from home edition. Why did I email you? It's even more complicated. It's much more emphasis. I am copying you because you're my boss and I want you to see that I'm busy. Or I'm really bored and I need human interaction. Or I want to prove later that you knew that I was going to do or not do or behave in a certain manner. So I have a written audit trail, or I thought it would be helpful. Or maybe I'm just emailing you because I'm not in the mood for another Zoom meeting, or I want to embarrass somebody. Or lastly, and just a little bit of humor, don't take it seriously. I was drinking and I CC'd you by mistake. So you need to, as a department and as a project team, be clear on when you email and what you email for and when you phone. And if you have group chats, try to keep the group chats efficient to achieve the goals that you want to achieve, because otherwise you are wasting everybody's time. Now, when you are doing a project, there are risks and issues. A risk is something that could potentially impact your project. It is important to note that it is potential. It hasn't happened, but it might or might not happen. You need to keep track of it so that if it does happen, somebody can do something about it. And it can affect the people, the processes, the technology, and the resources. If you plan for your risks, then you can do risk mitigation, which is to develop actions or options to reduce the potential of something going wrong. Now, to give you an example of a risk, global warming and rising seas are a risk in the modern economy in which we find ourselves in. However, you are based in Johannesburg, which is at least 1,700 meters above sea level. So global warming is, for your purposes on your project, it's not a risk. It's not going to happen. It might happen, but it's not going to affect you doing a slide or a document. Next is issues. And issues is something that has happened. Let's say a new team member joins. He was supposed to get the computer on his first day. He's been there for 7 days. He has not received the computer yet. That is the issue. He cannot work. And you need to allocate this to somebody to sort this problem out. Now, I have to stop there. We have used up our time. What remains to be discussed is how to manage your project, taking into consideration the risks and the issues, and then key learnings. After this session, I will give Johannes a link to distribute to you. This is the LinkedIn course. You have now more than enough information to prepare you to jump into the LinkedIn course. You should be able to complete it within 2 hours. Like I said, there's a little mini exam after it, and you don't need to study for it. Best of luck. I think you can do it, and we will get back to you if we have a fourth session to continue with us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Johannes.
Right. Thank you so much for everyone for joining. Just before we close off, I just wanted to know if there's any questions, comments, or feedback. Okay, no hands going up. So then, yeah, thank you so much for joining. I will. I don't think as the next session is quite a short part that's left. I'll just ask Ben to make a recording of the last part, which I'll circulate with you, and I'll also share the link for the for the workshop on LinkedIn. As Ben mentioned in the first session, is you can create a lynda.com or a LinkedIn account for free for 60 days or so on. So then you can continue with that. There's also other courses. So there's Coursera and edX and so forth also have more in-depth. Sorry?
For those of you who are interested, I can via Janus circulate a list of entry-level project management and more advanced project management courses that you can do in your own time. There's quite a variety of them, and there are various service providers through which, like lynda.com or Coursera or even LinkedIn, where you can do these courses.
Yeah, and I'm just going to circulate a survey for you to please fill in if you attend the sessions to just give a bit of feedback about how you found the sessions and so forth. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll be in